My name is Maria Jordan O'Reilly. I'm a visual artist currently living in County Cavan. I'm now in my early 60s and didn't always live in Cavan. I was born in Dublin, born and raised in Rathfarnham, and raised a family there, divorced and started to raise a second family there living in Tala, and eventually moved to Ballyborough. And I can honestly say it's one of the best things I ever did. It's my little corner of heaven. I'm living in the middle of nowhere between Ballyborough and Cavan in a little cottage in the woods, which my grandchildren fondly call Granny's Cottage in the Woods. People ask me why I create visual art. Why do I do what I do? And the answer lies in part in my own history and also in my present. So, the last time I studied art was for the Leaving Cert way back in 1978, which was a long time ago. And even though I enjoyed it, I never really connected with art at that stage. It wasn't until many years later, when my first marriage had broken down and I was going to counselling, that I came back to art by a kind of odd route, I suppose. So I'd spent some sessions with the counsellor who told me, "You're very articulate, but you're not connecting with your emotions. So why don't we try something else?" So she suggested the next session that I get paints and crayons out and use that to express how I was feeling. And that was that light bulb moment for me. Because what I couldn't express verbally, and it was because my brain was going to overdrive and I was overthinking everything, I wasn't allowing the emotions to come to the surface. But through art, through paint and crayons and whatever we happened to use on any particular week, it allowed the emotions an expression that I wasn't capable of giving them when my brain was taking over from my heart. And that is why I create visually. It's to express my history, my story, and my emotions and how I feel. And it's because words just sometimes aren't enough to make that connection. I just wanted to talk a little about the role of art in mental health and taking care of your mental health. And when I speak of art there, I'm talking about all types of artistic expression, whether it's photography or singing or music or dance or visual art, which is, while I dabble in the others, this is the one that really helps me to address my own issues. So I find when I am struggling with depression or anxiety, that what really helps me is to release that emotion through my art and my painting. And the curious thing is, I will often release very dark emotions into some of the work I do. And then I share the work with other people. And even though the work itself may not be dark, there's a connection there. It resonates with other people who maybe also have issues around anxiety or depression or just generally feeling down. And it creates a conversation. And suddenly you're there going, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only person who is feeling that darkness of depression or the stress of that anxiety or that knotted up feeling in my gut. Somebody else also feels that. And just the knowledge that you're not alone, whether it's from the person who creates the art or the person who views the art and has the conversation about it, it really helps when you're looking at issues around mental health. First of all, it brings them into dialogue and into the conversation. And secondly, it allows you a safe space to express them. And when I started expressing these emotions in my art, they weren't anything I showed to other people because I had a certain fear around it. But when I overcame that fear and did allow others to see them, the fear left. My fear was of people looking at them and laughing or taunting me or not understanding. But in fact, it's opened up a whole world of support and acknowledgement that my struggles are real and they're valid and I'm not the only person there. So it's a help to develop kind of a supports around that. And I hope it does it for other people who view my art as well. So that is one of the reasons I feel that art is very important when it comes to mental health and taking care of your mental health. It's one aspect of a lot of little things that you can do to help support yourself. The other thing I really enjoy is creating art with groups of other people and showing them techniques and simple things they can do to create a small piece of art in a short period of time. And sadly, during lockdown, there hasn't really been the opportunity to do that. I started a hen shed here in Baileyborough just before lockdown started, and one of the nicest sessions we had was when we all sat around with watercolours and I demonstrated some ideas and people played with it and tried some things themselves, and everybody was delighted with what they created. But far more important than what was created during the session was how the act of sitting around a table in community creating something acts as a mediator for conversation. And I know it's often said that one of the reasons men's sheds come into being is men talk shoulder to shoulder and not face to face, so it helps create that conversation. But there are times that women also need that mediating factor of a task that they can enjoy and that they can have conversations around. And the feedback from the session was how people hadn't picked up a paintbrush since they were in school and had created something that they enjoyed creating, that they didn't think they could do because for some reason, as children we're encouraged to be creative, but as adults we think that's not for us. So a lot of people went off delighted with that and delighted with what they created and what they made, and the surprise within them that even as an adult, this is something that can be enjoyed and it's a pastime. And I do hope some of them maybe pursue that a little more during lockdown. I know I did, and created some things. But as I said, the role of creating art and community as a mediator for conversation and as a mediator for connection is really, really important. And I think that going out into community and making artwork, whether it's purely for a peaceful, quiet, meditative morning, or for the more serious role of maybe creating something in community that is there for the role of social activism. Art can be extremely powerful within that. And that's something I'll talk about now in a second. Art surrounds us all the time, and most of us look on it as something that we use to adorn our houses, or something we engage in when we go to an art gallery, and we can derive great pleasure in. But the other side of art is when art is used for social activism. So I suppose the most famous person we would know would be Banksy, who creates his murals to bring awareness to others of different social issues. It's something that I aim to do with my work as well. When I have my first solo exhibition, hopefully before the end of the year, some of my pieces will address various issues in Ireland at the moment, such as homelessness, mental health, looking at isolation and depression and things like that. But I do think it's a very powerful way of getting a message across. I think the visual impacts us far more than what we hear a lot of the time. So it's hugely important. I don't really have much more to say about it at the moment. I have a larger project in mind, and hopefully we will do a little piece on that when it comes to fruition. I've recently been drawing a lot of inspiration from the carvings up at Lough Crew. And of course they're evidenced in Newgrange, all over the country, dolmens and stone carvings and Sheila na gigs. And I just find a connection across the eons with the artists who created these. And I wonder why they were created, or what were the thought processes behind the people who created them. Were they created as a form of adoration of a deity? Were they created just for enjoyment or for each other? And one of the biggest connections I think I find is with the divine feminine, which would have been very, very predominant in pre-Christian Ireland. And I think that's something that has been forgotten almost globally, and very sadly. There was a time on Earth when most societies were matriarchal societies, and when the feminine was considered divine because women were seen as the progenitors of life and the beginning of creation. And I think that respect for and reverence of women and of their role in society has been lost. And I think patriarchal religions are at fault to a degree. So I think it's time to reclaim that, reclaim the divine feminine. I did a project many years ago, which was interesting, where I changed some of the Mass liturgy to reflect God as female and not male, and presented it to people to get their reactions to it. And most of them were shocked. And even a priest I read it to was going, I never thought of it that way. And the bottom line is, men are given this image of divinity, which is male, to aspire to. If you like the ultimate role model, man can be a god, but women haven't been given the goddess to aspire to, and we can only aspire to what we know. So I really think it's time to reclaim the goddess and reclaim a more powerful role for women in society. And that's me now off my soapbox with the importance of women in roles of power. I think it's time for change.